when you make a rule, you're really just writing an equation for my function. Okay, so think of it this way. You're given a table, and now, instead of just graphing the table, we're going to try to take this table, and we're going to try to write a rule for it, an equation. Okay, so let me give you some kind of parameters on how we do that. So when you write a rule, your rules for functions always start like this. Y equals. So if you don't know anything else, just start with y equals. Okay, you're going to write an equation with y equals. Then what you're going to do is, on the other side of your equal sign, I want you to put an X just somewhere. Notice how I put a little room here and a little room back here. Okay? Because what we're going to try to do is, we have to try to figure out, what should I put near the X? What should I add? What should I subtract? What should I multiply? What should I divide this X, so that when I plug in my X from my table, it actually gives me the number for my Y. Okay? So we're going to do the first one. All right? So think of it this way. Your X value is 1. Okay? You want to ask yourself, what can I do to the number 1? Can I add, subtract, multiply, or divide something so that it will give me 5? So I have the number 1. Should I add, subtract, multiply, or divide something to it so that when I'm done, it equals my output, 5? Okay? So here's what I'm going to do. When I do this stuff, when I try to create a rule, the first thing I try is always try the simplest thing. I'm going to try addition. Okay? So if X is my 1, what should I add to it so that I can get it equal to 5? And this should be fairly simple. You're probably thinking, well, that's easy. You're going to add 4. Okay? So remember, 1 was acting as my X. So we're going to try this rule. Okay? So my X is here, and the rule I'm going to apply to it is, no matter what my X is, I'm going to add 4. All right, so let's try this. Give me a second. There's people coming in. I got to let them in real quick. All right. So let's try this rule. And what I mean by try, let's compare it to my chart. Okay? So here we go. We're going to take my first X, which is 1. So instead of X, I'm plugging in the number 1. Okay? What is 1 plus 4? It should give you your output. And in this case, it works. So this first thing works for my rule. But now we have to check. I want to make sure it works for all of them, because the rule has to work for all X's. So now I'm going to plug in my next X value, which is 2. 2 plus 4 is 6. Okay? According to my function, I should have gotten what? 10. Okay? So that means this rule of adding 4 is not working. It has to work for all the entire table. Okay? So I'm going to stop there. Your job is to find the domain and range for each of these and then create a rule. So this rule that I tried to create did not work. Your job is to figure it out. And I want you to do that for 11, 12, 13, and 14. Okay? So remember, when I say a rule, you're basically saying, what can I add to my x's? What can I subtract to my x's? What can I multiply or divide to my x's so that it actually gives me my y? Okay? So I'm not going to give you the answer. I want you to try it. I'm going to give you about, Let's shoot for 10 minutes to do these problems. And then I'll check back in with you. So don't leave Zoom, okay? I'll check back in with you and see how we are doing, all right? So go ahead and try these guys. And let me know if you have any questions. We want to write a rule or an equation. You always want to start your equation like this: y equals, and then put an x on the right side. We're going to do something to the x. We're going to add, subtract, multiply, or divide so that it gives me the correct output. Okay? We try adding 4, which I showed earlier. It did not work. Okay? So what you want to ask yourself, what can I do to my first input? What can I do to 1 besides adding that will give me 5? Okay? So think of it this way. Can I subtract something from 1 so that it equals 5? And the answer is no, that's dumb. Okay? What we want to do is, if you think about it, I actually want to multiply 1. And what should I multiply 1 by so it could give me 5? Well, that's pretty easy. I'm going to multiply by 5. Because 1 times 5 gives me 5. All right? So I'm going to write that rule here. So what should I do to my x's? According to my first thing, I'm going to multiply my x's. So let's test this out. So I'm going to plug in 1 into x. Okay, so 1 goes plugged into x. So it's 5 times 1. If you do that math, 5 times 1, does it give me my output? And the answer is yes, it gives me my output. So this rule that I just created works for the first set of numbers, the first input-output. Now I'm going to check, does it work for the second set? So I'm going to plug in 2 for x. 5 times 2. 5 times 2 is 10. Is that what I should have gotten for my output? And the answer is yes. It works for my second input-output combination. Now I'm going to plug in 3 in for x. 5 times 3. 5 times 3 is 15. Is that what I needed? Bingo. I needed 15. Now I'm going to try the last input. Plug in 4 for x. 5 times 4. Does it give me my correct output? Yes. So that means we have just found our rule. This equation is the rule for this function. Okay? And that's basically what we're doing. Let's go ahead and jump over to number 12. Okay? So I want to find a rule here. So like I just mentioned, how do we start our rules? Y equals, and then we got to put an x here because we're going to do something to the x. I don't know what it is yet, but we're going to do something. So here's the question. Looking at your x value, the first one, what can I add, subtract, multiply, or divide to 10 that will give me 3? Okay? The first thing that comes to mind, the simplest thing is, well, what if I subtract 7 from 10? 10 minus 7, does it give me 3? Yes. So this might be my rule, subtracting 7. So I'm going to put it here and test it out. Okay, so now let's test it out with the first x. So I'm going to plug in 10 here. 10 minus 7, what do I get? I get my output of 3. So yes, this first set checks off. We're good there. Okay, now I'm going to do my next input. I'm going to plug in 14 here. 14 minus 7 gives me, look at here, it gives me 7. This one works. My next rule, or my next set, plug in 18. 18 minus 7. Guess what it gives me? It gives me 11. So my rule is working so far. Now I'm going to check the last set. 22. 22 minus 7 is actually 15. So I have just found my rule, my equation. Okay? Again, it's that simple. It just takes a little bit of thinking. What am I adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing to get to my output? All right, let's do B together. So when we write a rule, we always start it with y equals and then our x variable. Okay, because we're using x and y as our variable. All right, so let's look at our first x. What can I add, subtract, multiply, or divide to -6 so that it equals 0? Again, I like to start simple. The first thing that comes to my mind is I'm probably going to try adding 6. -6 plus 6, okay, that actually gives me 0. So let's write that rule here. I think the rule is adding 6. So let's test it out for the next set. Plug in -4. -4 plus 6 is actually +2. And again, that's exactly what I needed. It works. Plug in -2 for x. -2 plus 6 is +4. That's exactly what I needed. My output should have been +4. And lastly, 0 plugged in for x. So 0 plus 6 is, you guessed it, 6. It worked. Again, I found my rule. Okay. So first thing I would have done for this rule right off the bat, this is just me, y equals the x, and the first rule I would have tried was adding 8. Okay. 8 plus 8 is 16. Good, it works here. 11 plus 8 is not 22. So that tells me plus 8, that rule does not work. So the next rule you should have tried was multiply by 2. 8 times 2, 16. So we're multiplying by 2. Then we go to 11 times 2, that's 22. 14 times 2, 28. 17 times 2, 34. So my rule is y equals 2 times x. It's red.